And we're live. Welcome back to Monk Radio for August 23rd, 2014. I'm joined here today by Austin Sellers, friend from South Carolina, right?
Yes, back in Tennessee now.
Oh, right, friend from Tennessee. So today we will be jumping right into answering questions via YouTube. You can actually go to the YouTube page for this video if you're watching it live and ask questions there. If you're not, you would ask questions then by actually clicking on the video. It says somewhere join this hangout or something like that. Join the conversation. Or if it's not live, if you're watching this canned, you can go to radio.sirimangalo.org and ask questions via the Google moderator frame at the bottom of that page. Don't ask questions by posting them as a comment to this video. That doesn't work. We don't answer questions that way. So before we kick it off, I thought I would sort of warm things up by talking a little bit about faith. So I'm going to do a little video here because I was requested earlier to talk about it. Okay, so the question is, what is the meaning of proper faith in Buddhism? It's an interesting topic because it's highly polarizing in Buddhism. There are certain modern Buddhists, modern meaning, let's say, Western Buddhists in the sense that they've come to Buddhism without any cultural background or any traditional background. So they've come to it directly through the texts or through a modern teacher. And so in general, there's a trend among such Buddhists to discount the concept of faith. They will say things like the Buddha taught us to question everything, not believe even him. And so give the general impression that doubt, skepticism, and by extension doubt is useful and faith is useless or even harmful. Faith is against the Buddhist teaching. There's another extreme. You have traditional Buddhists who are also highly educated, but coming from another approach, who feel, and it's actually more through their intense or in intensive study of the Buddha's teaching. But I'd say you have to admit that it is also partially coming from their faith in the Buddha's teaching that they've had since they were young, most likely, in most cases, who will say that you need to establish faith first in the Buddhist teaching, that faith is essential. If a person doesn't have faith, they cannot progress in the Buddhist teaching. So to deal with this, let's look at those two extremes and then try to find something that I would say is more in the middle, more moderate, and maybe a little more appropriate. So these are kind of straw men or straw arguments that I've set up, but I don't think they're far off the mark of characterizing the opinions of certain Buddhists. So first of all, the idea you have by posting the first straw man, it shows the danger of discarding faith, because doubt is a hindrance and faith is a profitable mental faculty. Now, this is important to understand, and it's important to properly understand. Because in Buddhism, we don't think of things conceptually. There's no, it's not an intellectual argument that faith, whether faith is useful or harmful. If you say, but faith makes people believe in the wrong things. If you have faith in something that is untrue, it can lead to disaster. That's an intellectual argument. It doesn't say whether faith is profitable or harmful. Faith is profitable, according to Buddhism, for the simple reason that it supports the mind. If you if all other things considered equal, you're undertaking something, and you put aside whether that thing is right or wrong, the fact that you have faith in it is going to make it easier for you to succeed in that endeavor. Why? Because faith is a profitable mind state. Faith is something that supports the mind. That's what is meant by profitable in Buddhism. We don't look at the intellectual argument. It's the same thing about with eating meat. Eating meat is karmically neutral. It's ethically neutral because it's not an intellectual argument. The point is that during the moment that you're eating meat, there's no reason why you should have to be either wholesome or unwholesome of intention. Doubt is considered to be unprofitable because it harms the mind. It scatters the mind. It prevents the mind, hinders the mind. It's a hindrance because it hinders the mind. If you are acting, you're undertaking some activity, all other things considered equal, doubt is going to prevent you from succeeding in that activity. So it's kind of a narrow definition. Broadly speaking, obviously faith can be dangerous, and obviously doubt can be quite useful. Doubt is something that, intellectually speaking, is useful in establishing what is true and good. But practically speaking, from a point of view of actual progress, it's the opposite. That faith is actually useful and shouldn't be discounted. The reason why faith is so dangerous is because it's so powerful. If you have faith in the wrong thing, it can destroy you. It can lead you to destroy and harm other people greatly. But on the other hand, if you have faith in the right thing, the power of it, so it's like a power tool. It's something that is quite powerful. Doubt, on the other hand, is something that is harmful. But in that sense, if you have faith in the wrong things, sowing seeds of doubt can allow you to destroy something that is harmful, you see. So if you're talking about faith in wrong view, in things that are faith in God or the self or so on, sowing seeds of doubt is harmful in a good way. That's the point here. So it's important to understand what you're talking about and to be able to differentiate. Obviously, it is quite clear that the Buddha did not want to have us. Well, there's no, and let's look at the other side then before I explain this. On the other side, if anyone who claims that you need perfect faith in the teachings or that faith in the teachings is necessary before you practice, I would say, from my admittedly partial study of the Buddha's teachings, I haven't studied absolutely everything that the Buddha taught and commentaries and sub-commentaries and so on. But I have quite a broad-based education in the Buddha's teaching, and it's quite clear to me that that is not what he taught. In fact, his teachings on faith, even when he said it's a good thing, are by no means front and center, are by no means core to the actual practice. I mean, right faith isn't in the Eightfold Noble Path. It's not one of the things that the Buddha singled out as necessary. And in fact, as we know, in the Kalama Sutta, for example, there are cases where he was critical of faith and pointed out that pointed out the dangers of faith, which are obvious. So it came to this came to my attention recently because someone was saying, well, this was what they were told. They were told that the first thing you have to study the Buddha's teachings until you gain this perfect faith in them through study. And the first thing, well, after thinking about it for a while, it wasn't the first thing, but at one point it came to me, and it was as I was typing a response to this person's question, and after I typed it out, I read it, what I had replied, and I said, well, that's exactly it. That what I'd said is, there's no reason to believe someone when they tell you you have to believe something, right? So, person is telling you you have to believe in the Buddha's teaching, and they're saying, believe me, believe what I say. You have to believe what the Buddha said. So, it's actually kind of a form of question begging. Well, in order to believe what the Buddha said, I have to first accept that believing what someone says completely is a good thing. You see, so if I'm the sort of person who doesn't believe what people say without reason, then there's no reason why I would accept what you say. It's like, why should I believe you when you say I should believe the Buddha? It was basically it, and I think it forms a kind of question-begging, circular reasoning. I mean, like, why should I believe you in the first place, let alone believe the Buddha? And I think that's, I mean, it's obviously it's a valid argument. Why should I? You know, why you say this? You know, what are your reasons for saying I should have faith in the Buddha, for example? And I think that's really how the Buddha would have us approach this. Obviously, the Buddha said right view is important, and it's important from the beginning of the practice. But the question is whether right view means belief in the things that the Buddha was teaching. And so it's not that you shouldn't believe anything or you go into it with an open mind. It's not that you should come and practice thinking that everything is possible. There are certain arguments and teachings that have to be presented to a person for their evaluation. But here is how I would say it has to be approached. It has to be approached proportionately. A person should have faith proportionately to the reasons presented for having, or the evidence, proportionate to the evidence. So if someone comes up to you and says that there's a God who is going to judge everything you do and send you to hell or heaven based on your deeds, well, you should examine your reasons for believing that. If someone says to you, hey, if you practice the way I teach, it leads you to complete enlightenment and nirvana and true freedom from suffering, and you never have any, leads you to not be born again, or so on and so on, then you have to examine why you should believe that. Both of these statements are difficult to believe. And so I would say our appropriate response is to be skeptical towards those statements. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think someone who is skeptical about the reality of nirvana, that's reasonable in the beginning. So, because the alternative is to believe something disproportionate to the evidence, and so this is the other thing that I think needs to be pointed out is the consequences of believing something disproportionate to the evidence. So, as long as our belief is proportionate to the evidence, we will have a sort of a equilibrium in our mind. So there's a certain sense of contentment, right? So you'll never have a feeling of conflict internally. If you believe in something, and this is the curious thing, because obviously if you believe in something like the supreme creator God who's going to send you to heaven or hell, reality is going to come back and hit you hard. And you're going to be constantly bombarded by evidence to the contrary. For example, the widespread suffering in the world, or the lack of any sort of evidence. You're going to be constantly bombarded with doubt, uh, because it's patently not true. It goes against reality. But the question is, what if you believe, and this is how this question arose, what if you believe disproportionately in something that is true? What happens, and what's wrong is what was presented to me. What's wrong with, as I said, believing completely the Buddha's teaching before you have any evidence to support it? If all you had was other people's say-so, what is wrong with believing 100% in everything that the Buddha said? Now, more likely or more common is the idea that textual study is enough. So it's not actually without any evidence, but the evidence is arguments that have been presented by the Buddha. So but through reading the Buddha's teaching and the commentaries and sub-commentaries, it is often claimed that that is enough evidence to provide reason to have perfect faith in the Buddha's teaching. I would say that's also patently untrue. But let's talk about that after. First, let's talk about what if you had no evidence, but suppose someone told you, okay, you practice insight meditation and you become enlightened. What would be wrong with having total faith in that? I think the first thing that comes to mind is faith actually acts as an inhibitor to investigation, right? Why investigate something if you already know it to be true? And you find this with Buddhists. Often people read, so let's just lump it in there. People will do the reading and come up with these reasons to believe, or maybe that's not even with reasons to believe, but they read about these teachings and it sounds good, and the Buddha is so good at presenting it, and so they believe it. They come to this faith and they feel the rapture and the pleasure of hearing the Buddha's arguments and seeing how he debates and wins debates and so on, and they just feel how great it is, and so they just believe in what the Buddha taught. And you'll find that these people are quite often disinclined to actually practice the teachings. They feel content in their knowledge, and in fact you find this with scholars quite often, that the more they study, the less inclined they are to, or maybe not the less inclined, but it certainly doesn't make them more inclined. It certainly doesn't bring them to the practice. They can actually become complacent. But beyond that, a second problem is that even though, suppose you have X and it's in line with reality and you have perfect faith in it without any knowledge, the problem is that faith isn't enough to support that. It isn't enough even to bring you to that realization. So what you're dealing with is not only the faith in it, but you're dealing with wrong view that actually contradicts it in the case of Buddhism. So suppose you have the knowledge, the idea of non-self, and you have a person who believes 100% in the truth, or they say they do anyway. They put their faith in, and they suppress any kind of doubt. The problem is that this doubt is going to act very similar to contradictory evidence. So even though there is no contradictory evidence, the more you look, or reality supports the idea of non-self, your own doubts and your own wrong views are going to conflict with your faith, and so you're constantly in a state of upset, of what do you call it, distress, because of the conflict. It doesn't actually work. Faith isn't sufficient to propel a person towards truth. And in fact, the idea that faith is necessary from the beginning is, I don't think, supported at all in the texts. Right view should be an understanding that one gains through the practice. So preliminary right view for a person who hasn't yet practiced meditation is not the view that nirvana is true or so on. It's right view in a general sense of understanding reality. It's actually in relation to the building blocks of reality. It has to do with a vision of what is the nature and what is the makeup of experience. And so what a person should have faith in the beginning is the basic nature of reality. And that's only important because otherwise you can't actually approach reality. So if a person is approaching reality from the point of view of people, places, and things, or the point of view of an external three-dimensional reality, and they're thinking in terms of concepts and in terms of dimensions and so on, they'll never be able to experience their experiences. They'll never be able to observe their experiences objectively and clearly. A person has to shift their view. And so a preliminary right view that the Buddha talks about is shifting that view to see things in terms of experience. When you move, to be aware of the movement, to not think of it as your foot moving or moving out, moving here, moving there, or so on. It's in terms of the experience of the movement. When the stomach rises, it's the experience of the rising. When you feel pain, it's the experience of the pain, and so on. And there is no need beyond that for faith in nirvana, faith in this or that or the other thing. But proportionately speaking, that sort of faith, there should be an amount of faith, a certain amount of faith proportionate to the reasonable nature of the claims. And at that point, there's also the idea of authority. So a person teaches you meditation, and you begin to realize the truth, and the more they advise you, the more you understand, and so you begin to believe the things that they say. If they make claims about what's going to come next, they'll say, well, if you practice along this path, this happens. So you have some measure of faith, and again, it's not all or none, but you have some measure of faith because they're reliable, and then it turns out to be true. So you have greater faith in the things that they say. It doesn't mean that you ever have to have full faith, and you shouldn't, and you can't, because full faith in what someone says isn't enough. Again, even if it doesn't conflict with reality, it will conflict with your own lack of understanding and realization until you actually realize it for yourself. That's why there's a difference between what we call bhavana saddha, which means faith or confidence based on meditation or actual development. That kind of faith is unshakable. And that's really what the Buddha was talking about when he talked about right faith. It's something that is balanced with wisdom or combined with wisdom, because it comes through seeing things as they are. You don't ever really have to believe things disproportionate to the evidence. But again, the danger being a disproportionate doubt, which is also quite common. People think it's one or the other. So if you don't believe something, you're skeptical of it. And so they'll have disproportionate doubt, all constantly doubting the things that they experience. Anyway, just some thoughts on faith. I certainly don't believe one extreme or the other. I think I've said what I meant to say, that faith is useful, beneficial, but dangerous if it's disproportionate. So there you go. Anyway, I think that allowed for some time for people to ask some questions. So here we have a whole bunch. Let's see. Here we have a comment. Thanks for the teaching. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for being an audience. Okay, we have 3 questions up here. Austin, do you have one ready for us there on the moderator page?
Yes, I've got one.
Okay, well, let's go through these first, but I just thought I'd make sure you're ready. We'll go through these ones and then you can say whatever that one is.
Okay. Would you like me to read the ones on the Hangout?
It depends, I guess, if I'm going to do a video.
Okay.
Let's see if I'm going to do a video. Okay, I'm not going to do a video on this one, but we'll just talk about it. So a person used to be a serious practitioner, but experienced a lot of trauma and now has trouble practicing, and there's so much pain and suffering in the world, it makes it hard. It's difficult to practice because of trauma. But practice is always difficult when you're outside of a meditation center and out of the reach of a dedicated teacher. So the best advice is to find a teacher in a meditation center and undertake intensive practice. But there are techniques for making the practice easier, especially in the face of trauma. Lying meditation, sitting in a chair, these sorts of things make it more comfortable and make it easier to practice. Supporting it with loving kindness meditation, sending love out to people who have harmed you or who you've harmed, to those you love, to those you don't like, sending love out to the world in general, compassion and so on, sending out thoughts of love and compassion to the world is supportive, especially in this case, I think, when you're cognizant of the pain and suffering out there. Patience is another thing that comes to mind, because just because something's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing, obviously. And meditation is going to be hard no matter where or when or how you practice it. And so having trouble practicing isn't really a showstopper. The fact that you're studying the aspects of reality that bring trouble is an invaluable thing. That in and of itself is an invaluable practice. It's important to understand that practice isn't something of necessarily hours, days, or weeks, or even months. Unless you're doing intensive practice, it's more likely to be a thing of years or even lifetimes. So you can consider yourself on the right track if you're slowly studying those things that cause suffering in your life. Even if it means just doing a few minutes at a time of studying it. There's no real answer. You can't just make things easy. So that being the case, you have to learn to deal with them being difficult. If they're going to be easy, they're going to be easy. If they're going to be difficult, they're going to be difficult. Your only say is in where you go from here. So doing good deeds is another one. Being kind and generous to others, helping other people, having good relationships with the people around you, cultivating goodness, avoiding unwholesomeness like drinking or killing or stealing or lying or so on, keeping your mind clear. All of these things. There are many things that can support your practice. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Is there an advantage to trying to meditate longer once a day or to meditate twice a day but shorter sessions? Well, the more you can meditate during the day, there's no hard and fast rule here. It's not like clocking up hours and then you get paid. We're talking about enlightenment, which doesn't have a schedule. In the end, the point is to be always mindful, whatever helps you get there. Probably twice a day, but shorter is better in that regard, because it means you're doing it twice a day, and it's more on your mind than once a day. But best would be if you could do it throughout the day. The koan system, no, not my field of expertise. Specifically about the statement that all shortcomings and defects of character are cause of misdirected instincts. That's not my statement, is it? I don't say such things. Is this true? Makes my brain hurt, sorry. Audience is shuffling about. Can mics not be muted? Yeah, mics can be muted. Yeah, before you move around, the audience is complaining. They say mute your mic.
Oh, is that me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, last question, and then we're going to go to some canned ones.
Would you like me to read it?
When noting seeing, huh. No, I don't think we need to do a video on this one. It's just an interesting question. So you can focus either on the object. I would say the object is maybe going a bit far, but you focus either on the, I guess for lack of a better word, the object, but not in terms of it being an object. Like you wouldn't need to focus on the battery, right? But you'd focus on the light that's being seen. Or you can focus. So it's either focusing at the eye or the light. Either way, but you don't want to go too close to the object to the point that it becomes conceptual and you're actually thinking about the battery or thinking about the object. Seeing should be about, it doesn't really matter, you see. The point is that your mind is on the seeing. You don't have to push or pull your mind anywhere. At that point, when your mind is on seeing, your only object is to remind yourself. Remember, the mindfulness doesn't put the mind on the object, it just reminds you to keep the mind neutral. So it reminds you that that's only seeing. So when your eyes are closed and you see something, you do that as well. Just say to yourself, seeing, seeing. But it's only a reminder that this is only seeing. The idea is that the mind is already on the object or is already on the experience of seeing. Okay, Austin, you got one for us?
Yep. Question. If one did a wrong in the past, would it be appropriate to repent by reaching out to those people to tell them I was wrong? Repentance.
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. It's not necessary, but it makes both of you feel better. And yeah, can be helpful. Can be helpful in terms of negating any potential harmful effects to either of you, to both of you, to your relationship. I mean, you find that often or sometimes people they don't need an apology. So it's not a big deal to actually apologize. When you say you're sorry to someone, it's not actually. It feels kind of hollow because it's just words. It doesn't negate what you've done. Is the point. And I think people often mistake that. They think you can make things all better by apologizing, and you can't. The deed is done. What's done cannot be undone. So it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to let go of it and let go of the causes of it. So those things, if you were intentionally harmful to someone, to root out those problems. It's a reason to feel a sense of urgency when you realize that you have these tendencies inside, and that in the future you might hurt other people in the same way. But beyond that, apology is not the most important thing. You can ask forgiveness even in your mind. Sometimes that's sufficient when you mentally make a determination, wishing for that person to be happy, wishing for them to be free from suffering, and apologizing in your mind. But not the most important thing. Still, it can be helpful, especially if you have a relationship with that person, or if it was something that they've taken to heart and are holding a grudge. I think I quieted people. We have no more live questions. Okay, did you flag that one as inappropriate on moderator? Did you flag that and get rid of it?
No, I did.
Okay. All right, let's go for next one.
Since I have become more meditative, dreams from the distant past and present that I have forgotten are arising and passing spontaneously in my mind quite often these days. Is this common? It's a source of anxiety for me. Thanks.
Well, why would that be a source of anxiety? I guess I'm being difficult, because obviously the reason that things come up from the past is because of their content, because of their nature. The reason we keep memories in the first place is because of their importance to us. So the strongest memories are going to be the ones that have the most emotional charge to them. Emotion seems to be, in terms of the brain, like the solder that welds or the electrical charge that allows for a storing of the memory. So the more the stronger the emotion, the stronger the imprint on the brain, and so it's the stronger the memory. So meditation, because it clears the mind and focuses the mind, these memories are given a lot more, they're given that focus and that attention. And so you find yourself reliving all of the memories, and you find them coming up more because you're no longer suppressing them, you're no longer ignoring them, you're no longer diverting yourself with new stimuli. So because you're not engaging in new activities during the time that you meditate, the old ones have a chance to surface. So they're surfacing all the time, but we're pushing them away with new stimuli, with the world around us and people and places and things and experiences and activities. So absolutely, it's normal. It's what happens to everyone when you meditate. But the anxiety is because generally the nature of these these memories, at least in the beginning, are ethical in nature, or have to do with ethics. So there will be unethical things you've done to hurt other people, things others have done to hurt you, and so it's a great thing that they come up, that you now have a chance to deal with them. The purpose of them coming up, the purpose of practicing meditation is to work through these things, is to straighten your mind, and a large part of that has to do with these memories and your attachment and the stress that has to do with, that's involved with the attachment to these things. Still no live questions. We've got 28 viewers, but with my 1000th video, I think I answered the final question. If there are no questions by 6 o'clock, I'm quitting. We'll do an hour show today. I had a long one there about faith, and that'll be a good video for this week. I'm really going to try. I'm trying to set up a studio in the basement to continue the videos on basic Buddhism, and I know there are the Dhammapada videos. It's so much easier, you know, the camera's up here, and there's the mics and the lights and everything, and to carry it all downstairs, set it up, it's not that it's difficult to do, it's just a sense of inertia. If I had someone here doing it for me, or I said, you go set up all the camera, you be my camera person, I'll do the video, that would be ideal. I would encourage more videos. So come on out. Anyone who isn't aware, we have rooms here still. I'm not sure for how much longer, but I'll be here until late October, and we should have at least 1 or 2 rooms if anyone wants to come out and visit, do a meditation course. Or in January wants to come out. In January we'll certainly have room. Come and stay and come live with us. Maybe there's someone who wants to come and be a steward. You can drive us around when we go for lunch and be my camera person. Here's a question. Meditating for longer periods, pain in the back of our legs. Pain isn't a sign of anything. That's the point. Experience doesn't say anything. It's just an experience. So you have the experience of pain. What that tells you is that you're experiencing pain. The only thing it should tell you is that you are that there is an experience of pain. And so mindfulness is the means of understanding that. What you should do at that point is acknowledge the pain until it goes away. Pain is not a sign of anything. Now, practically speaking, that may not be true, or practically in terms of the world, that might not be true. So it may be that the pain is debilitating, or it's injuring you. So it's a sign that if you continue, you're going to actually injure yourself. That's 90% of the time that's not the case, but there are certain extreme cases where, in certain people's, if you've had injuries in the past, or you have back problems, etc., it is possible. I mean, I don't have any evidence to suggest this, but I will accept that it is possible that you should that it is a sign that you're injuring yourself. Even to that extent, from a point of view of the meditation, it's not a problem. So go ahead and injure yourself, right? There's no problem from a point of view of meditation, even though that doesn't work practically speaking. From a point of view of meditation, even if the pain is going to kill you, the best bet is to see it just as pain and learn to let it go, even if you die in the process. Practically speaking, that doesn't work. So practically speaking, you do have to be aware in some case. But again, it's an extreme case. It's very rare, and for the most part, meditating through the pain will actually make you stronger and healthier. Far and away, the more likely scenario is that it will actually bring health to the body if you sit through it. But in the beginning, especially, the other thing, I've talked about this before, but pain can actually lead to anger and upset. It can actually disturb your meditation because you're not prepared to do this. So in the beginning, yes, you should switch, but you should switch when you're no longer able to deal with the pain. And you should try to increase your tolerance. Constantly be challenging yourself to be able to sit through greater and greater pain until you're able to sit through anything without flinching. Okay, we got more canned questions?
Here's one. What does it mean to meditate on something? For example, emptiness or death. My understanding of meditation is having no inner dialogue or thoughts while being aware of the breath or just being aware.
Well, your understanding of meditation is quite restricted and limited. Meditation can mean many different things. In fact, the idea of just being aware, I think, is unrealistic, because when you're aware, you're always aware of something. The mind takes an object, that's just its nature. You'll be aware of a feeling, you'll be aware of your awareness, you'll be aware of thoughts. So you're always going to be meditating on you'll always be meditating on something, even if it's just meditating on the awareness itself. So if when you're aware, the only way you can meditate is to focus on that awareness. So it's still on something. Meditation on death is no different. Meditation on the breath is no different. So if you're meditating on the breath, that's meditation on something. But I guess you're looking at the difference between meditating on something that's there versus cultivating something in the mind, like the idea of death, the concept of death. It's just another object. Whether you create it in the mind or whether it's there already. I mean, the difference is conceptual meditation can't lead to insight about reality because it's not real. Whereas meditation on reality, on what is really there, leads to insight, but often doesn't lead to the same sense of calm because it's impermanent, unsatisfying, and uncontrollable. Next question.
Is an arahant always in nibbana? If that is so, can you do normal things like hold a conversation while in nibbana?
A good question, really. I'm not entirely certain. It depends what you mean by the word nibbana. And it's not quite clear to me, and it's probably just my lack of in-depth study, but an arahant is understood to be, in a sense, in nibbana. But only in one sense. Nibbana itself is the absence of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. It's this state outside of arisen phenomena. It's total peace. But an arahant is said to be in nibbana in a different sense, in the sense of the peace that comes through seeing that state. So an arahant goes through life having been freed from suffering, but they're freed from suffering through the experience of cessation. It's really a different thing. I don't quite understand how it's understood as being nibbana, but in terms of the word, it works fine, because an arahant has no more defilement. So even though they go through life, there's a sense that they're freed from suffering. It's called sa-upadisesa nibbana, with remainder. It still has life. So the arahant still lives, even though they have no defilements, and hence they don't have any mental suffering. But they're still involved with the physical suffering of the world. So they still feel pain, they still get old, they still get sick, they still die. But there's no mental suffering. Now, anupadisesa nibbana is nibbana without any remainder. When an arahant passes away, then there's no more old age, sickness, death, no more seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking, no more body, no more mind, etc. But that's not the actual state of nibbana is that state of cessation.
Got some live questions.
Yeah, let's do some live ones.
Should I stop doing useless things only when I understand for myself that they are useless and don't even want to do them anymore? Listening to music, for example.
Yeah, this goes back to that faith thing. And no, I don't think that's almost right, but it's missing the fact that you might be wrong. And it's also missing the fact that, I mean, obviously you accept that you might be wrong, but there's something important in that fact. And also the fact that indulgence in music itself may be contributing to your inability to see it that you're wrong, which it does. Indulgence in addiction makes it more difficult to give up the addiction. So it clouds your mind. If you're addicted to drugs, people say, well, if I eventually I will, just one more hit is what they say, and then I'll give it up, or once I've had enough, that kind of thing. But it doesn't really work that way, and in the meditation, you can't just go by your realizations, because your realizations are being hindered by the addiction. And so you have to do one better than that. You have to challenge your assumption. And this is where you have to have a modicum of faith, in the sense of someone is challenging your assumption that music is good for you. And you have to examine that. You're obligated to consider whether that might be true. Now, if it seems ridiculous and music is obviously good for you and this person doesn't know what they're talking about, then you can throw it out. But if you consider that they might be right, and you examine briefly your history of indulging in music and how it hasn't brought you true and lasting satisfaction, then it behooves you to go against your own desires, because I think that's the first step. The first step isn't giving up your desire. So you have to separate two things out that you're saying. You're understanding that they're useless and not wanting to wanting to do it are two different things. Because understanding, well, at least on the superficial level, it comes before you lose your desire. There's 3 stages to addiction in terms of Buddhism, from point of view of Buddhism. The first is the view. So the view that something is good or bad. In this case, you have the view and the belief that music is good for you. The second is the thought. So just an errant single thought that something is good for you. So the thought that music is good is when you say to yourself, I like music, or boy, isn't music a great thing? It's just a thought that comes up. It's similar to the view, but you haven't yet agreed with it. You haven't affirmed it. The view is where you say, yes, that is true. That's view. But when you just have the thought, oh, music is good, you can still say, no, 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 that's wrong. And the third stage is the perception. So the feeling that you get, it hasn't formed into a thought yet, but it's a perception that this is good. You hear the music and there's a feeling, boy, there's a feeling of liking the music. These are 3 stages. The first one is the first to go. So first you get rid of the view, because no matter how much you like the music, you see that it's not satisfying, it's clouding your mind, it's clouding your judgment, it's making you irritable when you can't listen to music, and so on. So you get rid of the view. You've still got thoughts and you've still got perceptions. Eventually you're able to get rid of most of the thoughts until there's only the perceptions, and you know that it's harmful to you, and yet you still enjoy it. And eventually you do away with even that, and you find true peace because you don't even like or want the music anymore. So there you go. That would have made a good video. I can't become a monk because if I do become a monk, no one would take care of them, meaning my parents. No one would take care of my parents. Yeah, well, I hear you. Sometimes people have to take care of their parents. But eventually, becoming a monk isn't the most important thing. Take time to take care of your parents and do good deeds and practice meditation and make a determination that someday you will dedicate your life to the practice of the Buddha's teaching. I find it easy sometimes to fall into a nihilistic point of view. Any advice of keeping a more compassionate one? There's nothing wrong per se with certain types of nihilism. And I assume you're not talking about the afterlife, the after death there's nothing kind of nihilism. You're talking about there is nothing, nothing's useful, kind of existentialism almost. A sense of meaninglessness. Yeah, meaninglessness. Well, that's really actually true. Nothing has meaning, and there's no reason to be compassionate. I think people are often hung up on the idea of compassion. It's really not that big of a deal to be compassionate. You know, when the opportunity arises to be compassionate, then it's the accurate, the proper response. If you see someone hurting, if you see someone in pain, then lack of compassion does point to um, some kind of injury in the mind. Injury is illness in the mind. That the mind is lacking something, and that often comes, the apathy at other people's misery, the apathy at other people when other people need your help, and you're apathetic, not wanting to help them, and so on. To some extent, if it's if something genuinely needs to be done, it's often people have apathy towards it, even though it's clearly a good thing and a right thing to do. That kind of apathy is harmful. But that apathy is an illness. It's an imbalance in the mind. Imbalance is a good word. And so it is done away with through meditation. Meditation doesn't make you constantly compassionate, but it makes you appropriately compassionate. So when the opportunity arises, you're compassionate. When the opportunity arises, you're loving, you're kind, you're all these good things when it's appropriate. But most importantly, it makes you mindful and balanced. So you act appropriately, and you know how to act appropriately in all situations. I cannot accept the validity of reincarnation. Boy, what a surprise. Such people exist in the world? I'm just kidding. How much can Buddhism hold for such a person? Well, a lot. I mean, here's the point. Reincarnation, how could you believe it? You have no proof. You have no evidence in reincarnation. So what do you do about this reincarnation thing? I've tried to discuss this. Really the problem, if you look at Indian society, people in India in the time of the Buddha were not stupid. They were not less intelligent than us today. And as much as we'd like to think, they weren't. We aren't really more advanced in our understanding than they were. I mean, these people in the time of the Buddha had the things they were able to do with their minds. We don't even believe possible today. We think to be impossible. But they were able to read people's minds, fly through the air. Astral travel was just a thing people did. Not to mention simple control of the mind. Their ability to focus the mind on a single object, the meditative powers, even if you put aside any kind of supernatural, unbelievable thing. Their simple ability to control their mind. If you read the things that they wrote, in the time of the Buddha they didn't do writing so much, but if you read the texts that came out of that period, it's just phenomenal, the sort of logic and reasoning and philosophy that came out of India. And India is just one example. So a part of the problem is our paradigm in the West is wrong. It doesn't work when we discuss reality. It only works when we discuss that small portion of reality that is physical. That and by small portion, what I mean by that is our physical, that presents itself to our limited senses. So we think this is we've come to think that we are small and the world around us is so big, this three-dimensional, four-dimensional time space around us, that this is somehow meaningful. And so we talk about physics as though it were the golden standard. And it's ridiculous, because no matter how big the universe can be, it's all arbitrary. The laws of physics, how do you know that they apply outside of the known universe? How do you know that there's not a universe next door that has a totally different set of laws of physics? I mean, there's no reason to think that the speed of light is fixed, except in this physical universe. I mean, for example, I don't even know if all of that is supported, but it doesn't really matter, because the physical is all conjectural. It's all something that you project. I don't even know that that when I open the door, the next room is still going to be there. I suppose it is, because time and again, that's what happens when I open the door, is I see the room next door. But there's no reason to believe that that's going to be the case, and that physics just works on that assumption. It works on assumptions. The assumption that things are still going to be the way they were just because they were that way, and therefore it's a law. So how that deals at all with what you're saying is that in India and in much of the world before Descartes and that whole three-dimensional, four-dimensional movement, the impersonal movement, the movement to take things outside of the personal, before that it was all experiential. So reality was, how does your experience work? How does personal experience function? Cause and effect. What is the nature and the relationship between the mind and the body and the physical and mental aspects of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and thinking? And so they came up with a lot of wrong ideas, like the soul and the self and God and so on. But one thing that was clear from many viewpoints was the concept of rebirth, because death, first of all, was something that you only saw happen to others. You yourself had no experience of it. But more importantly, the evidence pointed in the other direction. People remembering past lives because their minds were so sharp and clear. People experiencing near-death experiences, which of course even occur today. Out-of-body experiences. Interaction with angels and gods and ghosts and beings in other dimensions. All sorts of crazy experiences that seem to have been, if the claims have any validity, seem to have been justified. So the idea that, there was a greater weight put on the mind, whereas now in modern science it's considered to be at best an epiphenomenon. So meaning that it's just a byproduct of the brain. It was sort of the other way around, and more often there was the idea that the world was created by the mind. And that was, I think, substantiated by one's own experience, because people had, well, of course, in terms of the Buddha's teaching, it certainly was and is. The more you practice the Buddha's teaching, the more reasonable it seems to assume that the mind is greater than this physical form. And so the idea that it should reincarnate is just par for the course. I mean, it's a part of it's an extension of your own observations, because you observe the mind arising and ceasing. The idea that it should continue on after death isn't a stretch by any means. So I would say, for you, if you cling to the idea that reincarnation is false, if you cling to the idea that at death there is nothing because it's based on the brain, then you're going to have trouble. But I would say it's a form of clinging, because you should see. My claim is that through your practice, if you are objective and don't cling to doubt and skepticism, that your practice should show you that it's reasonable to assume that the mind continues after the death of the physical body. So it won't give you obvious evidence necessarily, but it will make it reasonable, and it will help you to see at least how there's the possibility, and let go of your certainty in the idea that the mind ceases because the brain stops functioning. Could you please do live group meditation sessions? Yeah, sure, why not? Let me think about it. I'll get back to you. If you want to follow that, you can keep tabs on my weblog. I'll try to figure something out. Maybe we can do once a day meditation sessions. I can set up a webcam, maybe downstairs. We have to get it. What we need is a wireless webcam. That's it. A wireless webcam. No. Would that work? Yeah. Wireless webcam, and then we can do, I don't know, we can do you just broadcast the webcam? I think nowadays you get a wireless webcam and it's just broadcasting to the internet constantly. And then we'll just do meditation sessions once a day. Do half-hour walking, half-hour sitting. Yeah, I'd like to do that. I'll look into it. But if you want to know when it's happening, you'll have to check my weblog. And someone has to get me the wireless webcam first. If you want to get me the wireless webcam, go on my wish list at amazon.ca. Amazon.ca. I'll look for a webcam and put it on my wish list, and someone can help get that. If someone wants to sponsor that, then we can go forward with that. Because it's way down. The hall is downstairs. We'd have to put it where there is no computer. Anyway, I'll look into it. Thanks for the suggestion. I'm going to log off. That's all the questions, the live questions anyway. There's still a whole bunch of canned ones, but they can wait. So thanks for showing up, everyone. We got 31 viewers now, and hope that was somehow useful and beneficial. Wishing you all success and progress in your practice, and peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Be well.